Welcome everyone. Today we will be exploring Posh-mark's usability concerns and investigating their solutions. Before we jump right into the material, I would first like to make sure that everybody is caught up on what exactly is Posh-mark. Posh-mark is an online thrift market for fashionable and typically expensive or posh brand name clothing at more affordable prices. It is also a discourse community centered around the acquisition of chic or fashionable clothing. Our objectives for this presentation are to evaluate Posh-mark's user interface and judge it against recognized UI principles so that we may detect problems with the website's UI and recommend solutions. Our larger goals, however, are to improve the average user's experience and increase website's traffic. Our method for achieving these objectives are based largely on the work of Jacob Nielsen, a pioneer in the practice or technique of heuristic evaluation. Nielsen, in his seminal work, The Theory Behind Heuristic Evaluations, introduces a method for evaluating the usability of an application's user interface. In a nutshell, heuristic evaluation comprises of a panel of evaluators, each independently judging some application's UI against predetermined criteria to collectively generate a list of usability problems. The effectiveness of the evaluation largely depends on how well these predetermined criteria are selected. Luckily for us, Nielsen outlines 10 UI principles or heuristics against which we may detect the usability problems implicit in Posh-mark's website. What even are these highlighted usability principles? In overview, they are 1. Visibility of system status. 2. Match between system and real world. 3. User control and freedom. 4. Consistency and standards. 5. Error prevention. 6. Recognition rather than recall. 7. Flexibility and efficiency of use. 8. Aesthetic and minimalist design. 9. Recognize, diagnose, and recover from errors. And 10. Help in documentation. The effectiveness of these heuristics are in part due to their generality, which is why they have remained essentially unchanged for several decades. However, the con is that it can make some of the heuristics appear too vague to be apprehended without additional description. Thus, rather than clarify each heuristic in a sequence, a task which could very well take its own presentation, we will clarify each heuristic as necessary before discussing the corresponding usability problem detected in Posh-mark's user interface. Our heuristic evaluator detected only 5 usability problems with Posh-mark's website. We will now take a closer look at each of these 5 usability problems and discuss their solutions. Help and documentation. Nielsen's group summarizes this point as a measure of last resort, something that users ought not to normally need, but it's there if they perchance end up needing it. The problem with Posh-mark's UI in this regard is that they lack real-time support for new users. None of our test subjects could correctly distinguish between a posh show and a posh party, both of which are key features that Posh-mark offers. Interestingly, this remained true even after the user test subjects were given an opportunity to view the How It Works page. This finding suggests that the information which users require is not sufficiently accessible. Our solution to this problem is to implement a UI design pattern called coach marks to provide new users with proactive guidance. Coach marks are temporary messages that educate users through new or unfamiliar product experiences. The coach marks are convenient and avoids users being deterred by giving them homework. As you can see, we have included a demo for what a coach mark for Posh-mark could look like. The idea is that when a new user logs in for the first time, this overlay will appear on the Posh-mark's homepage, and it introduces the new user to the different features of Posh-mark's homepage. What's very important is that it provides new users with guidance proactively, so it circumvents them having to go to the How It Works page and scroll down to look for the options, to look for the information that they are searching for. Match between system and real world. Nielsen's group summarizes this principle as an application's user interface having a skeuomorphic design. An example of a skeuomorphic design is an Apple Watch having a UI design that resembles an analog watch. Posh-mark's ad placements sometimes violate this skeuomorphic design principle. In the real world, goods belonging to the same showcase are usually sold by the same vendor. Less attentive users, in line with their real-world intuitions, might mistakenly click on an ad and be unexpectedly redirected to an external website. Ironically enough, in doing so, Posh-mark is effectively violating their own community guidelines, which prohibits redirecting web traffic outside of Posh-mark within product ads. 6. Recognition rather than recall. Nielsen's group summarizes this principle as designing an application's user interface in such a way that the user is not forced to pause his action to recall some bit of information. The corresponding problem with Posh-mark's website is that its homepage lacks effective reminders. Rather than remind users about a basket of goods which they have already passed on, it would be more effective to remind users to continue shopping for that item which they have merely yet to discover or find. Essentially, the users are subtly encouraged to recognize the next step in their Posh-mark experience rather than have to go to the effort to look back at the previous steps to determine if or where they want to go next. Amazon implements this idea best with irresistibly convenient links. Users are not merely given links to a basket of goods that they have already viewed, but are given a taste of similar wares wherein they can recognize their next step. Visibility of system status. This usability principle is all about keeping users aware of what's happening within the system's operation. A good way to appreciate the importance of this principle is to picture if loading bars in websites were absent. The user would have no idea if his request was even being processed. In Posh-mark, users are not always notified when administrative action is taken against their account. Our evaluator experimented with conducting a sale on Posh-mark, and his post was removed by Posh-mark admins without any notification. This opacity breeds mistrust between the user and Posh-mark. With over 100 notifications for random follower events, a single notification for an important event is well warranted. Aesthetic and minimalist design. Unlike some of the other heuristics, this point is pretty self-explanatory. User tests agree that Posh-mark's homepage is too cluttered. The problem owes its existence in part due to the presence of redundant tiles. You can observe here that there are two piles both displaying carousels for the same feature. Another possible solution is to filter out the ads for products that are not consistent with the buyer's preferences, which are surveyed during the initial account setup phase. This concludes our presentation on the usability problems detected in Posh-mark's website using primarily the technique of heuristic evaluation.